Donald Trump opened a new front in his trade war this week against a new enemy, the rest of the world. And he made no distinction between adversary or ally. The U.S. president slapped sweeping, punishing tariffs on more than 100 countries. In fact, the European Union is facing a 20% tariff. China, 34%. Japan, 24%. Vietnam, a whopping 46%. South Korea, 25%. Taiwan, 32%. And India, 27%. The move sent global markets into a tailspin. China retaliated almost immediately with matching 34% tariffs on American goods. Other countries are indicating they want to negotiate but are readying retaliation themselves. All of it raising fears and odds of a global recession. Paul Krugman is a Nobel Prize-winning economist and a former columnist at the New York Times. He is with me now. Mr. Krugman, good pleasure to see you, and thank you for making time for our program.
It's good to be on.
What should we take, sir, from the market reaction late last week?
Well, the market is not happy with the tariffs. I think there's also, it's more than Trump's tariffs. It's also the whole process and what it says about all Trump administration policy, which is that it's kind of like, oh my God, these people don't know what they're doing.
And also maybe even beyond that, the uncertainty created by that. It's certainly in Canada, we feel that. And I'm wondering your assessment of the degree to which that is being priced into things.
I think that the market has finally picked up on the uncertainty, although it's, I'm not sure that people have really fully taken it into account. I mean, this is unique. We've had high tariffs in the past, although this is now bringing us up to beyond Smoot-Hawley levels, but they were relatively stable tariffs. You didn't find yourself wondering what will the tariff be next month, let alone next year. So that's a whole other thing. It means that businesses can't plan, they can't invest. It's all the whims of the imperial president, and that's a completely unique situation. You know, normally you would expect the U.S. dollar to get stronger on the prospect of tariffs. It's actually gotten weaker in the last few days, and that's probably reflecting the extreme uncertainty. Tariffs don't normally cause recessions. They do lots of bad stuff, but not that. But this one, again, might because of the uncertainty.
And do you think the uncertainty will likely be the primary driver of a recession should one occur?
Yeah. The U.S. economy, you can think about, was there anything out there that would have led you to expect a recession before Trump started his tariff policy? Well, you could argue that AI was a bubble, that stocks had gotten ahead of themselves, but there was nothing really screaming recession. And then all of a sudden you have this, and this is unique, you have this drastic policy and drastic increase in policy uncertainty coming completely out of the blue. The U.S. economy in January, the U.S. economy had sort of full employment, steady job growth, fairly contained inflation expectations, and then suddenly you're hit with this, basically crazy policy.
I mean, you wrote on the economy for a quarter century. Did you ever foresee a self-inflicted recession?
Not really. We've never seen anything like this. I mean, I thought that we might have eventually debt problems. I thought that we might, if we failed to raise the debt limit and had defaulted, that could have caused a recession. But something like this, normally when we fault previous presidents, other countries' leaders for bad economic policy, it's usually for responding badly to a crisis that came from outside. Herbert Hoover, the great villain of U.S. economic history, he didn't cause the Great Depression. He just failed to do what needed to be done to stop it from happening. This is the first time ever that I can think of that just plain the president's moods, his whims, his obsessions seem to be leading us to a high probability of recession.
One of those obsessions is what you referenced, Smoot-Hawley, in sort of his understanding of, his own, I should say, understanding of the historical impact of tariffs. I'm wondering if you could reality check what his administration has put forth, which is essentially that policy was the golden era of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of wild to if the golden era of the U.S. economy was the long period after World War II, when we were steadily reducing tariffs, and we had so in the course of a generation, we saw living standards double. That was the really good time. If he wants to say that the 1890s was somehow a golden era, not only does he have to ignore the fact that there was, it was the Gilded Age. Inequality was extremely severe. Poverty was high. Yes, the economy was growing, but there was actually the Panic of 1893 was one of the worst slumps in U.S. history. Not on the scale of the Great Depression, but kind of second or third in line there. So where he gets the idea that this was a great era, I don't know.
He's also gone on to justify them by saying that it will be used as an instrument or a tool to bring, in particular, manufacturing back to the United States, which is especially important in the Canadian context if you look at the auto tariffs in point because of the interdependent nature of the auto sector in both our countries. How worried should Canada be about the prospect of that manufacturing leaving our country for the U.S. under the guise of this?
It's not clear to me that a lot of manufacturing is going to leave. I mean, the tariffs are sort of supposed, they will throw up impediments to trade, and that will hurt industries on both sides of the border. Canada exports a lot of automotive products to the U.S. and vice versa. So it's not, this is damaging on both sides, and it will raise costs on both sides of the border. But I think that the issue is less about manufacturing going to the United States as it is to the disruption. I mean, there's a history there. Canada had an automotive free trade agreement going back to the 1960s with the United States, which was really important because the Canadian auto industry was a tenth the size of the U.S. industry, and it was highly inefficient because of inadequate scale, and it was really important to integrate it. Now, even the U.S. industry will be badly disrupted by this. So this is really raising costs, making all of these industries less viable.
And do you think ultimately those industries will be impacted, even if, let's say, corporate North America thinks there might be a reprieve from this down the road?
Well, in some ways, the prospect for reprieve is kind of weird to say, but the prospect of a reprieve makes it worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you knew that the tariffs were in place indefinitely, then okay, businesses would hate it, but they would at some cost adapt to it. But they probably don't even want to invest in those adaptations because of the possibility that it won't last. So, a 25% tariff forever is a bad thing. A 25% tariff that may or may not be in place next year is even worse.
And as far as countries responding, I mean, China has levied a counter tariff. Other ones are hoping to negotiate, but considering retaliation. Canada has been pretty specific and targeted, but also retaliated. What is your view in the Canadian context of, I guess, the impact of retaliation and your best advice moving forward?
Okay, there's a textbook economics case that says that, well, you shouldn't retaliate. Just because other countries have rocky coasts doesn't mean you should mind your own harbors. And there's a logic to that, but I don't think it's a feasible position to take. For one thing, look, Canadians, by all accounts, are enraged by what's happening, as they should be. And also, this is Trump. He takes any sort of concession as a sign of weakness and goes for more. So if Canada fails to retaliate, then he'll become even more convinced that he can bully you into becoming the 51st state. So you need to take a stand. And in some ways, what we need to, I'm sorry, but the U.S. has become a rogue player in the world economy. And the other reasonable countries out there need to, in some ways, present a common front. So I think that Canada, if possible, coordinating its response with the European Union is going to be the way it has to go.
When you describe the U.S. as a rogue player in the world economy, I mean, I don't know if a decade ago I would have ever imagined that prospect. Yeah. Do you think the damage is permanent?
Some of it is permanent. Even if somehow Trump leaves before the 4 years are up, even if the U.S. rolls back some or all of his tariffs, the fact that this could happen is a terrifying lesson. I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk about the need for prudential reduction of dependence on imports. And we were talking about that in the United States, about how we can't be dependent upon China for crucial strategic goods. Well, the United States is now in its own way as unreliable as China. I'm sorry, if the old establishment that enforced at least fairly stable policies was going to be reestablished, that would be one thing, but it won't. What's going to happen now is that we will always be one election away from going crazy again.
I'll leave it on that note. Mr. Krugman, thank you for your time today.